I'm painting another Moonstone character today. This time it's Wasp. I'll be using a primer, a brush-on primer that I haven't tried yet, and some new techniques that I'll use on the wings as well. In the video, I'll break down the paints I'm using, and this is going to be a minimum set of paints, and I'll go through the brushes and equipment too. I've been using this Moonstone Monday series as a great way to dive into a bit more colour theory, learn some new techniques, experiment and just have fun with painting, because for me that's what it's all about. And I'm going to be using the Moonstone core book to get some ideas for the colour scheme for this miniature. These books are fantastic if you don't have them already. I love the artwork and the narrative is just fantastic throughout the whole game, but this is a great reference for when you start painting. A lot of the time I'll get a picture up on my laptop and I'll use that, but for this miniature I really wanted to get the guide from the book itself. And here you can see, we'll zoom in a bit closer, you can have a good look at the colours they've gone for. I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to go with this purple for the fleshy parts, greens and yellows for the wings, and then silver and gold. And if you look closely, the way they've drawn this artwork, you can almost see the brush marks, and it looks like it's drawn in a similar way that we'll be painting, starting with the dark paints and getting lighter as we add more and more layers. Now we've got our art reference, let's have a look at the paints. And I'm going to be using this Two Thin Coats range from Duncan Rhodes, and I'm going to try and use as few paints as possible. Going for the 4 primary colours, a silver and a gold. Haven't tried this gold yet, so looking forward to that. Black and white, and then a simple Battle Mud wash. Going to use my Army Painter wet palette, and I'll be using the Army Painter Regiment brush. I use this for most of the models. I'll also use the Citadel detail brush later on too. I've put in a new sheet of greaseproof here and added some fresh water, and that's going to be ready to start painting. Got my Moonstone mug too, so let's get going. The first thing I did was use this new primer. This is a brush-on primer by War Paints. This is the Army Painter War Paints range. Haven't used it before, but got to say, really happy with how it went on. For quite a light grey, I think this is certainly better than the other versions I've used in the past, where I've used the airbrush primers. And you may have seen that video where I brush them on, and some of the lighter colours don't work as well as the darker ones, but this is perfect. It's designed to brush on, and with a nice chunky old brush, it goes on really smoothly and keeps all the detail of the miniatures. So once that's completely cured, we're ready to start painting. I'm going to grab some of this ultramarine blue and the sanguine scarlet, and I'm going to mix up a purple colour. So I'm trying to use fewer paints than I would normally do, and I'm using them to mix the different colours. So later on in the video, we'll be making greens, yellows, we'll be making different brown colours as well, and really using as few paints as we can to get some fun techniques. I'm going to add a little bit of white to this, just to bring that purple down a little bit more towards the colour that I'm going for. And this is going to be the kind of mid-tone. Now I want to add a darker shadowy colour for the base, and so I'm going to add some green to it. And purple is opposite green on the colour wheel, and when we do that, that can give us a nice, rich, complementary shadow colour that we can use. So here we go. I'm going to start now painting in all the areas of the flesh that we can see with this shadowy purple colour. It's a nice smoky colour. I really like using these opposite colours on the colour wheel. I think it works really nicely, nice and subtle, rather than going super dark and then going lighter and lighter. I'm going to be doing all the base colours first. So now I'm going to work on the wooden spears that he throws, all the javelins. So now I'm going to make a brown colour. To do that, I'm going to get some of the red, some of the yellow, some of the blue, and I'm just going to mix them together until I get the right colour that I'm looking for. I find I'm using a lot more red here to get a nice reddy brown, and then mixing it up, and then we're going to add that and just fill in all the areas of the model that are brown. It's pretty much only going to be those javelins. I always clean off my brush once I've mixed the paint, and then I just twist my brush through it to get a nice point at the end, and then I'm just going to block in all that brown colour. I've really been enjoying mixing my own colours. It saves on the paint as well. You don't have to buy such a huge range, and you can really have a lot more fun, I think, and get to know your paints a lot better. I've mixed up a nice green-blue colour here, just green and blue together, and then that's going to be the base for those wings. And I'll be doing some new techniques on the wings later on. Didn't quite come out as good as I hoped it would, but I'm still happy with the finished result, as you'll see later on. Let's move on to the silver areas now, just using this straight out of the bottle. I'm still putting it on my wet palette there, even though it's a metallic paint. That's no problem at all. And I'm going to block in all those silver colours, and that's going to be the tips of the spear and quite a lot of armour on this miniature as well. Let's try the gold, the dragon's gold, and this is the first time I've used it, and I've got to say I'm really happy with this colour. It's a really nice gold, not super bright, but really good when it goes on. Then once we add a wash later on, it really does look like aged metal, so perfect for armour for your miniatures, and I think it works really nicely. And I'm really impressed with the wash, as you'll see later on. Right, now I'm going to mix up some orange, and then I'm going to use that with the blue. So the same as we did with that purple earlier, I'm taking the orange, which is opposite the blue on the colour wheel, and look at that. That's given us a nice smoky shade now that we can use as our base. I want it a little bit more grey-blue, so I'm going to add a tiny bit of black and mix it in until I'm happy with the colour. And then I'm going to use this for the mushroom. And so that mushroom and the skin is going to look quite close in colour at this stage. But once we start getting lighter, it will break up and it will look like two totally different colours as we start adding the lighter blues to it. Now we've done all the base colours, it's time to let that completely dry before we add the wash to it. Now I'm using my colour palette again, not ideal for the wash, but rather than getting out a little bottle top or something, I'm just putting it onto the wet palette and working quite quickly to cover the whole model with a nice even coat, and then let that dry completely before moving on to the next stage. And now I'm going to take that mix that I made earlier, add some white to it, and this is going to give us a nice colour that we're going to use for those cool mushrooms that you can see on the bottom. And then I'm going to block that in, trying to leave a little bit of the dark coming through in areas where it meets different parts of the miniature, like the toes and also those javelins, but mainly blocking it in with this new colour. Now I'm going lighter again, just adding a bit more of the white paint to it. And you can see this is a great technique that will save you buying tubs and tubs of different colour paints. I mean, I've bought those in the past, I've still got them, and I use them occasionally. But for Moonstone and for this new project going forward, which has still got another 4 or 5 months to go, which is awesome, I'm going to paint all the miniatures with just this range of paints. And altogether, there's only 14, so it's really pushing me to think about colour a lot more. I definitely recommend it if you want to do something different, a new project. Just kind of limit yourself on the colours you're using and try and be a bit more creative. It's really fun. Okay, let's get back to these mushrooms, and you can see now we're getting lighter and lighter as we add layers, and I tend to just dot it on as I'm getting to the really brightest colour here now. I'm just putting little bits where I think the light is going to catch that mushroom the most. This is going to add some texture to it, and from a distance I think it's going to look great. Now we're going to continue with this layering process, getting lighter and lighter with each layer as we move on to different parts of the model. So I'm going to go over all the fleshy areas, and I'm going to start with quite a bright purple. Sometimes I'll use the base paint that I used before I put the wash on, but in this case I'm going for a brighter purple because this is quite a precise, thin miniature. The parts are very small, so we haven't got an awful lot of space to work on, especially around the face and those legs. So I'm going straight into that brighter purple, and then we're still going to do a couple of layers of purple and get brighter and brighter as we go. But for the first one, after the wash, I thought I'd brighten it up, and that's going to make it a lot easier to paint. So here you can see mixing again on the colour palette, adding some white to that mix, and we're good to go. As we go lighter and lighter, I'm not painting as much of the model. I'm almost just touching it, little dots here and there. And I'm always trying to think about which areas of the model the light's going to hit the most. So you can see on the tops of those toes there, the knee especially, it's going to get a lot of light. And that's where the model is going to look a little bit lighter. Let's go a little bit brighter again, add some white to it. And then you can see on the colour palette all the different colours we've used then. And again, it's just from using that blue, the red, a little bit of green for the darker base shade, and then white as we want to brighten it up for the layers. So nice and easy, you're only using a few paints to get some nice effects. I thought it'd be cool to make the toenails black. That's going to make them really stand out, and that's going to be a nice break between the blue of the mushroom and the purple of the flesh as well. So I'm just painting those toenails in black. Let's start layering up those javelins now. So I'm adding a little bit of red and a bit of white to that previous brown mix that we made. And now I'm just going to carefully paint in the most raised areas. So I want all that rich shade, that deep dark shadow to come through. So just using the tip of my brush, sometimes the side of it, depending on the detail of the model, making sure I move the miniature rather than myself, so I've got lots of control. Now I'm adding a bit more white, lots of yellow to that, and this is going to be the final highlight. And here I'm just putting dots and dashes on the areas again where that light's going to hit the most. Now onto the wings, going to mix up some green with some yellow for this really nice bright colour, and you can see that's dried really nicely with the shade on there. It's rich, but I want to go in between the veins of the wings. Now normally I would just dry brush this and that would be nice and easy, but I thought I would make the veins darker than the actual wings themselves, so I'm going in between those veins with this lighter green, and then I thought I'll use a thinner brush later on and start layering up. Here you can see I'm going for a nice bright green now by adding some yellow and white, and I've switched up my brushes to the Citadel fine brush, and now I'm trying to do little brush strokes just in those gaps as well. I think dry brushing would have been a much better way to go for the finished effect, as you'll see later on, but it's worth experimenting. It's not always going to work out, but it doesn't matter because you can always just paint over it again anyway if you make any mistakes or you don't like the finish effect. But I kept going with this technique. I added some more yellow and white to it to go brighter still, going along those edges and just doing little lines here and there to add some detail and some interest. When that dried, I made almost like a wash really with that really bright colour. I added lots of water to it, maybe 5 parts water to 1 part paint, and then I decided to go all over it. You can see there that it didn't really work out, so I'm going to give it a nice coat over the inner wings and the outer wings, and I'm going quite heavy here with how much I'm putting on. I'm treating it like a shade. And then I put the model down flat to dry, and once it dried I went over it again with another wash there of that colour, but just on the outer wings this time, so they're going to appear a little bit brighter. I wanted to try these real colour markers from AK, and this is a nice dark brown colour. They're quite fat, these marker pens, but it's got a nice tip to it, so you should be able to get some detailing going on. And this is the first time I've used them, so it's fun to try them out on this project. And I thought I'd go along the veins here rather than using a brush. I thought I'd have a bit more control, and this is going to make them darker than the wings are themselves, and that's the finished effect. It's not quite as good as I was hoping it was going to be, but as you'll see in the photos later, once it's on the tabletop and you're a little way back from it, I think it looks okay, so we'll see that later on in the pics. Right now I'm just freshening up all the metal areas, adding some highlights just with the white mixed in with the silver and white mixed in with the gold, and just going along there using the edge of my brush and catching those sharp areas of the miniature. I add a little more white and go a little bit brighter and just add some of the tips there and just picking out again the areas where light's going to bounce off those sharp rigid edges. I do the same with the gold, couple of layers just to add some highlights, and then that's all we need to do for the model. I've added the basing to it so it fits in with the theme of previous models I've done, and here's Wasp ready for battle. It was really fun just using fewer paints to create the effects, and I love mixing the different colours together, so I'm really enjoying that process. I've got to say, the paints are really good quality, especially that wash, and I love the finished effect, and just, it doesn't come out glossy or anything like that. I'm really happy with the mushroom, especially. It's probably my favourite part of the model, actually. I love mushrooms in life generally, and so really cool to paint some on these miniatures. And the gold with that wash has come out nicely as well. We're zoomed in really close here, but from a distance, I think it all comes together. The wings, not too happy when I look at them close up. I think I could have been a little bit finer with the tip of that brush. But again, once you've got it on the table, you're a couple of feet away. I think it works really nicely. I painted Wasp as part of the February celebrations that happens every February with Moonstone, and if you want to go and check out their website and their Facebook pages, I'll put links down below. I'll also put a link to this other fairy that I painted as well. Now, I don't normally play fairies in Moonstone, but they're really fun to add 1 or 2 to the goblins. They can work together according to the rules. That's cool, and I'm going to give Wasp a go with my little goblin troop here. I think that's going to be great fun. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I definitely want to encourage you to try something new and experiment with your colours, and I'd love to know what you think. So let me know about it in the comments section down below. And if you've got any questions about Moonstone or anything else to do with tabletop skirmish games, please add that down there too, and I'll do my best to help you. So I hope you enjoyed this, and thanks so much for watching. There's loads more Moonstone videos on the channel, and I'll link to some at the end of this one. So for now, thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you here next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games.